program back, as I have been every week for now 43 weeks, for the Waste of the Week. And this is Waste of the Week is where I highlight waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government system that are using hard-earned taxpayer dollars that ought to be able to be used by the taxpayer to pay the mortgage, to pay the bills at the end of the week, to put aside some money, hopefully for the children's education as they grow, for any number of needs out there. We have the responsibility and the duty to be carefully managing the tax money that is assessed to our public. Waste of the Week has pointed out in some of the significant, but yet just a drop in the bucket, expenditures that have not been successful, not been used for the purpose that it's supposed to be used, a part of a waste, fraud, and abuse category of now nearly, nearing $200 billion, not small change. This week I'm highlighting a federal program that has a lousy track record, and over $7 billion in leftover money funds Congress that has appropriated for this program. Let me explain the program here. In 2008, shortly after the economic recession began, Congress created something called the Home Affordable Modification Program. In short, HAMP, H-A-M-P, Home Affordable Modification Program. This was a new emergency program established to help homeowners facing financial distress to avoid foreclosure by reducing their monthly mortgage payments. Now, this all occurred at a time when our country truly was in distress, a serious recession. People were working less hours or no hours, and those who owned homes were finding it difficult, if not impossible, to pay the monthly mortgage payments. So the HAMP program, which is a voluntary program for homeowners and mortgage lenders, if the two of them get together and agree to restructure their loan payments, they can stay in their home and it doesn't have to go through foreclosure. It's a sensible program at a time of real need, and lenders work through the Treasury Department to reduce those monthly mortgage payments to no higher than about 1/3 of the homeowner's income. I think historically, if you're telling your kids about buying a home, or you're graduating from school and you want to buy a home, the solid advice has always been, don't commit yourself to more than 25% of the income that you're earning to pay on your mortgage. You're going to need the rest of that money to pay the rest of your bills, all the utilities, food, transportation, buying a car, so forth and so on. Well, this program said all the way up to 1/3, if you qualified on that, we would use 33% instead of 25%, and restructure your mortgage so that you had fewer, lower amounts of payment that you had to make each month on that mortgage. So as I said, Department of Treasury put this program in place. It was scheduled to expire at the end of 2012. In 2013, after the program had technically expired, an inspector general found that the number of participants who ended up redefaulting on their new modified mortgage was increasing, and I'm quoting here, increasing at an alarming rate. Now, what is this word redefaulting? Look, if you don't pay your mortgage payments, you're in default. And if you're in default long enough, the bank or the mortgage company that's holding your mortgage says, we're going to foreclose and take your house back because you're not making the payments. This program was designed to help people avoid that catastrophe. So redefaulting is the process by which the person, having already agreed to, with the mortgage company and with the support of the federal government, agreed to a program to lower the payments so you could keep the house, they defaulted again. So the technical term is redefaulting, but it's two defaults. So Joe Smith has problems. He gets together with this program, he gets a new program in place, but then down the line, he defaults again. This became, according to the Inspector General, something that needed to be addressed because we just simply cannot continue to proceed with this program with the taxpayers' dollars if the participants aren't doing their share. The Congress then, despite the poor performance of this, not the Congress but the administration, unilaterally, how many times have we seen that happen during the Obama administration, bypassing Congress, unilaterally extended the program beyond its 2012 December expiration date. Interestingly enough, even with this extension, the number of applicants steadily declined. People either couldn't meet the measures or they didn't need it. The economy was improving, they didn't need to do this. And according to the Treasury Department, the number of HAMP participants declined because there was a shrinking number of eligible mortgagees. So, given that the outcomes of those receiving help were largely subpar and the number of applicants was declining, you would think then that we would come to the conclusion that the program needed to be terminated. It was already extended, past the deadline, but on the basis of what was happening with the program, essentially, we should terminate that. When HAMP was created, the goal was to help about 4 million homeowners. As it turned out, fortunately, the program ended up with only 1.3 million homeowners making it through the trial phase and ultimately accepted into the program. And of those people, about 1/3 ultimately redefaulted, costing taxpayers an additional $1.5 million. So here we had a broken program. What was left in the fund with the Treasury was $7 billion. Now, some people call these slush funds. This is money that's been appropriated, put into a program, not expended in the program, but sits there. And how many times have we heard about government agencies with excess money, excess taxpayer money, saying, well, don't give it back. Now, of course, this is the Treasury. Sometimes we say, give it back to the Treasury. This is the Treasury itself. Well, don't terminate this thing and give it back. We might want to use it for something else. Well, that's a classic way of describing how Washington often works. Spend them all the money that's appropriated to you, or they will reduce the money they give you next year. I've previously sat on the Appropriations Committee, and this is not a one-off proposition. Every year we have to scrub through these agencies' expenditures, and we find that there are excess spending near the end of the fiscal year so that they don't get a reduced amount of funds sent to them for the next fiscal year. Think of the ways that this money could be used if it was put back into the Treasury. Number one, it could be used for essential federal functions. Wouldn't NIH like to have $7 billion to be able to hopefully break through on a wonder drug that would address Alzheimer's or diabetes or something else? Wouldn't the Department of Defense want to have this money for the shortcomings that they've had with the drastic reduction of expenditures for our national defense and security? Wouldn't any number of federal agencies that produce essential programs that have to be addressed financially want to use that money for the right purposes? And most importantly of all, wouldn't the taxpayer want to get that money back, or not having it spent at all, or use it? Wouldn't the Treasury want to use it to reduce our ever-deepening national debt? So a lot of uses for this money sloshing around in a trust fund, not a trust fund, but sloshing around in a fund held by the Treasury Department. This is a waste because it's sitting there. It's going to be spent on something it was not intended to be spent on. And for that reason, it becomes a waste of the week. And as a waste of the week, we add $7 billion to our ever-growing total of waste, fraud, and abuse, taking our total now to over $170 billion. This is not small change. We have people struggling in America to make ends meet. They live paycheck to paycheck. They want their hard-earned tax dollars that are taken from their paycheck used for the right purposes. And if it's not used for the right purposes, they don't want to send it. They want it back. And we have an accountability to the American people and the people we represent to do the best we can to provide the most efficient, effective use of their tax dollars. And if we can't provide that, and this is just, as I said, a drop in the bucket. I could be standing here every day with a waste of the day. I could be standing here every hour with a waste of the hour. We have a responsibility to be accountable to the people whose money is taken by the federal government and used. If they don't mind using it for the right things. Maybe veterans program needs that $7 billion to treat more veterans better than the way that they're treated now. In any event, we add this total, we've got $170 billion plus of documented waste, fraud, and abuse. And I will be back next week with the next version of this, and we will continue to expose funding that is unnecessary and is putting a real burden on our hard-earned tax dollars being paid to the federal government. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.